Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about thinking as manipulation. In the previous video, we defined thinking as a process, as a mental process of manipulating representations. And we also said that there are two different forms of representation. Images, which is a pictorial form of representing information, and words or concepts, which is a non-pictorial form of representing information. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about the process of manipulation, how our mind processes, manipulates these representations that we've discussed in the previous video. So just to reiterate, thinking is defined as mental representation and manipulation. So it's manipulation, and there is no manipulation without the representation. So we need to talk about both. We did talk about representation in the last video. Now we're going to talk about manipulation. So here the question is, what is thinking as manipulation? Now, one way to think about it is the way we actually form concepts or representations. The representations can be images or concepts. And the way we form representation is through our experience, right? And for us to actually form representations, the memory system should be matured enough to form representations. So forming representation itself can be considered as a process of thinking. Forming concepts, as well as we discussed in the last video, is also a way of thinking, in the sense that we form concepts with repeated exposure to the objects. For example, dog. Initially, we have this. Kids develop this concept of any hairy thing looking would be a baba or a dog. Then later on, they learn. So through positive exposure, through positive and negative instances of experience with these objects, you form concepts. So these are basic thinking processes, but we're more interested in more complex mental processes of this sort. Basically, problem solving, decision making, and creativity. Now, if you think about it, these are all kind of similar in the sense that first let's look at each one of those individually. Problem solving. Problem solving is a process of finding a solution to a problem, and which we typically do by employing a strategy. And we'll talk more about this in a second. So, problem solving is basically solving a problem, finding a solution to a problem. Decision making is also similar to problem solving, in the sense that you still find a solution to the problem, but you have several options to choose from. So it is selecting one from available solutions that would be a decision making. So it's a kind of problem solving where the solution you are coming up with is actually given to you, and you're selecting it from several other options provided to you. And the last one is creativity. Again, you can also think of this as problem solving, where you're trying to solve a problem with a solution, but you're not interested in any solution. You're really interested in finding a new solution, a novel solution. Now let's look at the creativity. Um, so we said that creativity is basically finding a novel solution um, to a problem, not any solution. And there's this concept of divergent thinking versus convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is about thinking in a systematic fashion, or thinking leading to one conclusion. Divergent thinking, on the other hand, is not thinking about a solution, but thinking about various possible solutions. So you're just not interested in finding a solution. Instead, you're interested in as many solutions as you can. Creativity comes from divergent thinking. Now, best practices underlying creativity would be use of analogy. You can think of a problem and think of when you're trying to find a solution, you're thinking about other analogies that are similar or maybe not so similar. Maybe they're superficially similar, and in a deeper sense, they are not. So, using an analogy would be one good method. The other thing is you can come up with new ideas by combining already existing concepts. It's called conceptual combination, or you can build on a single concept, and it's called conceptual expansion. Again, we're not going over in detail about these different ways of thinking. What we're more interested in is actually talking about problem solving in general. Now, in this particular video, when we are talking about thinking as manipulation, if you can see, it's mostly problem solving, right? Decision making is also problem solving, creativity is problem solving. So we'll talk about problem solving in general in this particular video. So, some basics of problem solving before we move on to the specifics. For instance, in the following slides, we'll talk about different strategies people use to solve problems. For now, I just want you to give some basic idea of what problem solving is, some terminology that you will utilize in this concept, in this construct, in this context. I'm sorry. Now, in this problem, you see, you must move rings from peg A to peg C. You can move only the top ring on a peg, and you cannot place a larger ring over a smaller one. So this is these are the instructions given to you. Now, take a moment, pause this video, and think about how you would actually solve this problem. Again, this is the initial stage. The end stage is that all these three things would be here. Number three, ring number two, ring number one. And what you can do is you can only move only the top ring and onto a different peg, and you cannot place a larger ring above a smaller ring. So give a try. Well, now the idea here is not to actually solve the problem. I'm pretty sure you'll figure it out. The idea is to talk about some constructs related to problem solving in general, and this applies to any problem solving situation, but we're going to discuss that in the context of this particular problem. When you have a problem in psychologists or cognitive scientists, they think about these terms: problem space, operators, and constraints. First, we'll talk about problem space. Problem space is this mental representation you have of the problem, which includes your understanding of what these things mean. It may also include some visual representation that you might be using to solve the problem. So everything there is in this particular space in your mind that you are working on would be a problem space. Well, what would be included in the problem space then? Well, in the problem space, there are operators and constraints. Operators are things that you're allowed to do. In other words, it says that you must move the rings from peg A to peg C. Well, you can move, although this is instruction, but you can move only the top ring on a peg. So you can move this to the next peg. That would be an operator. Operator are the allowable processes or allowable things in a given problem. Constraints, on the other hand, are the things that you're not allowed to do. In other words, it says that you cannot place a large ring above a small one. You cannot place a large ring above a small one. That would be a constraint. So we commonly use this terminology to talk about problem space, operators, and constraints. So problem space in this is this representation of the problem itself, which includes operators of your ability to move things, and the constraint is the fact that you cannot move or place you cannot move all the rings at the same time, and you can only move one, and you cannot place a big one over a small ring. Okay. Now, and understanding this terminology would help us understand the processes involved in problem solving. Well, I'm pretty sure you must have answered the question correctly, but we'll come back to that problem later. But let's talk about now that you have some basics of problem solving. You know the definition of it. You also know the concepts, the constructs like problem space, operators, and constraints. Now let's look at the definition of problem solving again. Problem solving is finding a solution to a problem by employing a strategy. Well, then the next question would be, what are these strategies? There are several strategies one can apply, but the psychologists are most interested in these specific strategies: the trial and error strategy, insight, algorithm, and heuristics. And we'll talk about each one of these strategies. And because these are strategies, I name them as S1, S2, S4. So strategy 1, strategy 2, 3, and 4. Once we're done talking about the strategies, we'll talk about the roadblocks, the barriers to problem solving. In other words, barriers to adopting the strategies